I thought it was a good pick. I'll admit it. I'll raise my hand right now. You don't get a good or bad player. You get a player with a ceiling that you have to develop and create into a good player. Jeff Stoutland's able to do it with somebody who's never played football before. Jeff Stoutland's able to turn Nate Herbig, an undrafted kid, into competency. Now people are talking about Jack Driscoll like, oh, this is a long-term starter in the NFL. Guess what? If he got drafted same spot by the New York Giants, Jack Driscoll will probably be out of the league. That quickly. You have to develop players. You have to coach players. You have to get them up to their ceilings.
It's a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. You got a triumvirate to get it rocking and rolling today. Yours truly, Jody McDonald, with my co-host today, which is Jeff Kirk, because he can stick around for all 2 hours. And John McMullen is with us here at the top before he goes in and gets his COVID test and is told, yes, you're allowed to go with the team up to the press box at MetLife Stadium coming up on Sunday for the Giants and the Eagles. Boys, good morning to you both. How is everybody doing today?
Yeah, just getting ready for Thanksgiving here, Jody Mac. That's about it.
I'm getting ready for the Freddie Kitchens era of Giants football. That's gonna be good stuff.
Yeah, that's the problem with the New York Giants, McMullen. It's Jason Garrett, Freddie Kitchens. There's a lot of bad coaches on that staff.
And I don't know how much you can do with that offensive line. So Bill Walsh, bring him back. I don't know if that would help with that offensive line.
Agreed. The Giants right now are a mess, and I don't know that swapping out Jason Garrett is going to do it. For both of you guys, is this a scapegoating? I know that Jason Garrett did not do a good job since he's been in that position with the Giants. It's not like I'm defending him and going, what the hell are they doing, thinking moving on from Jason Garrett. Yeah, you can absolutely move on from Jason Garrett. But when he's the only move, is it cover for everyone else in the organization, specifically their coach and their general manager, when they point the finger and give the ouster to one individual when we know it's an across-the-board failure?
Yeah, from my perspective, I have a lot of experience over the past couple of years with scapegoating. That's been, in my estimation, the change in Jeffrey Lurie over the years. And people always talk about, has he gotten more involved? Not necessarily. He's always been more involved, but he's gotten more apt to scapegoat quickly. And long before he blew out Doug Peterson, it was, making an example out of Mike Groh, for instance, or Carson Walsh. And, anytime you go towards a position coach, never mind a coordinator, it's obvious scapegoating. But in the case of the Giants, because of what I said about the offensive line. So I think a lot of people are, well, we got to evaluate, and I know this is not Jody, but we have to evaluate Daniel Jones properly and see what we have in Daniel Jones. Well, you can't that. Nothing's changing. As much as people don't like Jason Garrett, what are you going to do? More max protection? I mean, they think, well, we'll get Kadarius Toney involved. We'll get Kenny Galladay involved. We'll get Saquon Barkley involved. Go try to run a jet sweep to Kadarius Toney when the left guard misses, it whiffs on a block. See how that works out for you. So yeah, it's obvious scapegoating, and especially at this time of the season, at least use it under the cover of the darkness of the off season, like Jeffrey Lurie does. I mean, to do it in season on a short week is absurd.
John, you actually brought in my next point there. I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, like it's Tuesday. You're playing Sunday. You just came off a Monday Night Football game. Your head coach literally scapegoats everybody, by the way. He always tries to say, well, it's on me, it's on the coaches. I'm like, but you're going you went against Jason Garrett and everything he did. You have a running back who just came back who can't pass protect to save his life. You have a left guard who is literally a turnstile. Andrew Thomas was a bad pick. He's by far the worst of the 3 tackles that were drafted that high. It's funny how the Giants are that team that they try to fix the offensive line every year, and they have a GM that's supposed to be an offensive line guru, yet doesn't know how to pick offensive linemen. It's really scary.
Yeah, and Jeff, Jody, and I talked about this a little yesterday. I do think, and I bring up Jeff Stoutland all the time. I don't like the thought process that so-and-so took a bad pick. Like, in other words, Andrew Thomas, the Giants weren't the only team that thought he had a chance to be a really good tackle in this league. Even Will Hernandez as a second-round pick. At the time, I admit, I thought that was a good pick for a Giants team struggling to fix this offensive line for half a decade now. I thought it was a good pick. I'll admit it. I'll raise my hand right now. You don't get a good or bad player. You get a player with a ceiling that you have to develop and create into a good player. Jeff Stoutland's able to do it with somebody who's never played football before. Jeff Stoutland's able to turn Nate Herbig, an undrafted kid, into competency. Now people are talking about Jack Driscoll like, oh, this is a long-term starter in the NFL. Guess what? If he got drafted same spot by the New York Giants, Jack Driscoll will probably be out of the league. That quickly. You have to develop players. You have to coach players. You have to get them up to their ceilings. And especially when you take a kid like Thomas, I guarantee the exact opposite. If the Eagles had him, he'd be fine because of Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah,
I'm
but
really confident in saying that.
Here's where I'll disagree with you a little bit, John. And again, I'm going by prognosticators, guys who put out mock drafts and some comments from teams and the like. A lot of teams had Thomas ranked as a lower guard at that point. That most everyone had Tristan Wirfs, who has been dynamite for Tampa, ranked ahead of Thomas, and they chose Thomas. And guess what? He's damn close to a bust. So that's the difference from, we just got to get him and coach him up. Well, I can remember it like it was yesterday. Most of, and you put as much stock into it as you want for guys who do that for a living, project first-round talent and the like. Most did not have Thomas ranked where he was drafted.
Well, you can argue that Wirfs or someone else is a better player. I don't know of anybody who didn't have Thomas graded as a first-round pick. I mean, if somebody did, point them to me because I don't know anybody. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, when you talk about a player that has turned into a really good player and who was in the same range as the grade, it's always difficult. We talk about it all the time with Jalen Reagor and Justin Jefferson. Yeah, I mean, it looks terrible. But Justin Jefferson's about to go over 1,000 yards. I just wrote about this in Sports Illustrated, making the comp again. He's about to go over 1,000 yards again in week 11 for them. They've already had their bye week. He's unbelievable. But as I say, if he came here, he's not over 2,400 yards. He's not, because they don't have that guy who can throw the football down the field consistently to get him the football. Doesn't mean he's not a good player. Doesn't mean he's not Jalen Reagor. Scheme fits into it as well. Offensive mindset fits into it as well. But in the case of the Giants, in this specific example of their offensive line that they've been trying to fix for 5-6 years, they just don't develop players, period.
Now, John,
end of sentence.
Now, here's where I want to go with this. The Giants have their pick and the Bears pick next year. Last I checked, I think it's like 5 or 6. Do they go quarterback? Do they go offensive lineman again? Like, how do you feel they
Yeah, they could go virtually anywhere. I mean, I think that's what they're trying. This is the last-ditch effort to try to say, okay, do we have it? They want to hang on to Daniel Jones' dream. And to me, Daniel Jones has become, I don't know if he had the ability to become a star quarterback or not. And most people assume, and I know where Jody is on this, and say, no, he's out. And I agree with Jody from that standpoint. It's over. It's over from a David Carr standpoint, not Derek Carr. Like David Carr back in the day, everybody knows that story. Number 1 overall pick, just, I don't know, 80 sacks, what the number was, maybe I think 72 for some reason. I mean, he was just shell-shocked at the end. I think you have a similar type of thing happening with Daniel Jones. If he did have anything, it's long gone because you haven't done the proper things to build around him. So I do think it starts with quarterback, but you got to believe in the quarterback. And if it's Kenny Pickett, you got to believe he belongs in that area. And this is not the year, at least most people are saying, to want a quarterback. So they're up against it from an organizational standpoint. And probably, they have to probably, and I never, anybody who knows me, I rarely advocate rebooting because I always point to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Continuity is better than the alternative in the NFL. Always, 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 always. When you hit Control Alt Delete, you're going to have some pain, at least for a number of years. The Giants, ironically, were one of those teams for years with Jerry Reese and George Young and Bill Parcells and Tom Coughlin. Continuity. And then they blew it up, and you've seen the results of it. One of the worst organizations in the NFL.
You can get into a vicious cycle, but you also have to do it because staying with something that is blatantly staring you in the face that doesn't work isn't any way to get your football team any better as well. Saquon Barkley returned from injury this year. Looks the way he's running like he's not quite 100%, but he's not hobbling out there, and he's doing squat-ta. Are we putting all that on the offensive line too?
Most of it. I mean, it's another example of bad organizational policy for taking a running back where they took him. But I mean, he's a talented kid. It's not a matter of talent. Obviously, the injuries have probably contributed to it, but yeah, when you're talking about skill position players, and this is why you and I, Jody, were higher on the Eagles than most people. They can't do anything until the guys up front block and make them be capable of doing something. Same thing with Kadarius Toney. I mean, Kadarius Toney at times wows you with some of these moves and some of these things, and you look up and he makes 4 moves to get 5 yards because, there's no space, there's no opening, there's nothing you can do with that athleticism because everybody's athletic if you're playing cornerback or safety in the NFL. Yeah, I mean, it all starts with the offensive line. It really does.
So this is where I want to go to, John, with a team like the Giants. Do you feel like they're going to be a little extra motivated this week? Because I know in New York they talk about the Eagles stole a playoff berth from them last year. Yeah, they're 6-10 football team. They stole a playoff game I just don't understand that logic or that mindset there. That just seems to me like a loser organization type of move.
Yeah, I don't think that particular thing will matter much, and certainly to the players who are struggling so much and hear it. I think if anything, some of the guys we just mentioned, Will Hernandez for one, might look down deep and play a little bit better because he's taken so many hits this week, and you don't want to hear it from that standpoint. I don't think the players care about that, tanking, taking Jalen Hurts off the field. As you mentioned, Jeff, they know they stunk last year too. I think that's more of a Joe Judge generated thing. And Joe Judge is trying to hang on because they're going to probably blow out everybody after the season, bottom line.
And, oh, by the way, if the Giants attempt to inward within their room or outward with coach to the media, if any of them go there, yes, and we owe the Eagles for last year. they should be cut like Jason Garrett immediately. You got bigger fish to fry. You got to worry about the lousy football you're playing right now, not looking back at what could have been last year with a 6-10 team. Please give me a break.
What could have been? What could have been? Yeah, six wins.
I find that very hard to believe. All right, Johnny, I want to flip it back over to the Eagles. You and I discussed this a little bit. Devontae Smith, been great, is great, going to be great. Dallas Goedert, been great, is great, going to be great. The Eagles paid him like he's going to be great, and he's certainly looking that way. And then there's everybody else in Eagle Green who doesn't catch footballs. They got two guys who are doing the job catching it right now. They need at a minimum a third, if not a fourth, and a fifth. And we've been running speculation as to who that could be. Can we pretend that it's August? We're going to pretend last year. Can we get going back to August isn't near as obnoxious as going all the way back to last year. And remember that Quez Watkins has big playability. Can Kenny Gainwell get back into the mix? Maybe as a wide receiver. You know, I vote for Greg Ward, but somebody's got to catch balls for the Eagles who aren't named Devonta Smith or Dallas Goedert. The coach was only joking yesterday when he said Darius Slay should be getting some touches.
Yeah.
What wasn't he J-Mac?
He was. I would like to see Slay as a returner, maybe. Nobody's ever done that. But obviously, you don't want to get somebody injured. They're not even going to consider that. But, yeah, he was just joking. As far as, getting somebody else involved, yeah, ultimately, I think they will have to get somebody else involved. But they don't have to as long as they run for 200-plus yards. So as soon as that stops, then they're going to have to get somebody else involved. And, I think you go back to early in the season and other people were involved. The problem is not the targets. The problem is not the receptions. I mean, when you only have 13, I think it was 13 completions last week, there's not a lot of receptions to go around to begin with. And Smith and Goddard are going to get the vast majority. Now, if you're up at 25, 30, other people are going to have to get involved. But the Eagles don't want to be up at 25 and 30. That's not how they want to play. So if they are, yeah, you're going to see better numbers from Quez Watkins or Jalen Reagor, but it's probably not going to result in efficacy as far as winning football games. It's going to look worse from that standpoint. So number one is the Eagles don't want to do it. Number two is who should be playing. Yeah, we joke about the Greg Ward thing all the time because you're the president of his fan club, Jody. But yeah, I wouldn't criticize him for playing him now because Jalen Reagor has failed. Let's be honest. He's failed and probably doesn't deserve to be on this field. And his camp doesn't want to hear that. And they don't want to be here. And after the season, they're gonna have to go in a different direction at receiver, but I think it's going to be a veteran direction. They're going to go out on the free agent market, sign a veteran player to complement Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, and I think that's what they should do. But that's off-season stuff. You got to get there, and for now, they want to limit the touches of the receivers for a number of reasons, not just the ineffectiveness of the guys behind Devontae Smith. It's also helping the young quarterback, obviously, as well. So right now they're trying to win games with what they have, and I applaud them for that.
John, so them running the football as much as they are, it kind of reminds me of Ray Rhodes' first year, his second year. The Eagles just pounded the ball down people's throats, and they had to start running back to do that. They didn't have the best offensive line in the world. No disrespect to Barrett Brooks and those guys, but they kept doing it because that's how they won football games. But that had a shelf life. What would be the shelf life for this team with running the football as much as they are in today's NFL?
Well, I think you've kind of seen it with Baltimore. That's probably the ceiling of it. And they haven't been able to get where they want to get in the postseason. Now, could that change in the upcoming years? Certainly. You're always concerned about injury. You're concerned about shelf life at the quarterback position. That's a problem as well. Teams are going to change eventually in how they play. You're going to see more probably 5-man fronts, probably 5-man defensive line. You're going to see them stop scraping the linebacker over the top at times and go in that direction. I talked about the slot blitzes. They're coming. I don't know when, but they're coming when they get to a defensive coordinator that is confident in his talent and ability to do it. You're going to see the slot blitzes to try to stop Jalen Hurts in the running game. So all of this stuff is coming. You know, Shane Steichen doesn't give us much. He did seem to know the adjustments are coming. I can't tell you when, because you look at this schedule, maybe Washington, because they have a lot of veteran players, even though they're missing Chase Young now. I don't think the Giants have enough confidence right now to do anything. Certainly the Jets, maybe down the road, but certainly not now with Robert Saleh. So I don't know if you're going to see it short term, but long term, they're coming. And the Eagles know that.
J-Mac, along those lines of shelf life, and you and JK are talking more about how long can they run this type of offense. I want to narrow focus on the guy who's getting the ball from center, and that's the quarterback. Jalen Hurts is running it very effectively, and the way that he runs it, he does put his body at risk. He's not the kind of guy who's going to slide. He's not going to be the guy who's going to get 6 or 7 and then dart for the sidelines. No, he's going to do what he did on the biggest play of the game this past week. Plant his foot and turn it back into the middle of the field. That's just Jalen Hurts. He hasn't gotten hurt so far in his pro career. He didn't get hurt at Oklahoma either. And, oh, by the way, he didn't really get hurt at Alabama. He was replaced by Tua Tagovailoa when he didn't play. How long can Jalen Hurts be the starting quarterback of the Eagles and run the football the way he's running the football?
Well, you know me, I don't think you can predict injuries, prevent injuries, or anything like that. If you could,
but you have to. I hear what you're saying, and I'm asking you to answer a very difficult question. But the question is faced by the Eagles coaching staff and the guys looking to go forward with this young man as their quarterback. Do you not have to factor that in? That at some point he's going to get hurt?
Yeah, that's why I talked about the shelf life. They know the shelf life isn't. We brought that up a little bit yesterday, Jody. I mean, and Tom Brady's the outlier, but even the guys who played into their late 30s at a pretty high level, he doesn't have that shelf life. I mean, if you're going to be honest, you can't play that way into your late 30s. So your shelf life by nature is ultimately smaller. So they know that, they understand that, but I also think the league has changed, and you know, if you can get a good 4 or 5 year window out of a player, you're happy, you check the box, and you move on, and start looking for the future. So I think first off, I think they're aware of that. Secondly, I think it was Les Bowen brought up, and this was a very good point, and I brought it up writing, but I hadn't brought it up, I think, on this show or verbally. It doesn't even have to be. People are thinking about major injuries. He could get banged up. He's going to get banged up. He might tweak his ankle and sprain his ankle and still go out there and tape it up and play, but he's not going to be able to do the things that he typically does in the running game, and he's going to be more limited, and that's going to force him to stay in and throw from the pocket. So there's all these kinds of things that are going to happen in the NFL. It's just a fact. 100% injury rate. We always talk about it, Zach Ertz. It's going to happen. So the Eagles are aware of that. They know it. And yeah, you constantly tell players, and they used to do this with Carson Wentz. I remember Frank Reich. Frank Reich you've seen it with Hard Knocks, and now people are putting out the clips, and you know, Frank's a man of faith, and he doesn't get frustrated a lot, and he's very optimistic. And the most frustrated I ever saw him was when Carson Wentz tried to lower his shoulder in that game against Carolina way back in 2017, and got in, and Frank was just pissed at him because they had been, since the day they got him, they said, you got to stop doing stuff like that. You got to stop drilling it into his head. And he just couldn't. It's his default setting as a player is to be physical, take advantage of his size, stick his head in. And we've seen all the injuries and over the years with Carson Wentz. They talk to players, and you tell them all the time, look, exactly what you said, Jody. If it's not there, go down. If it's not there, step out of bounds. You brought up Emmitt Smith. Some people have a natural affinity, a natural skill. It is a skill to do that.
John,
but it's come. Emmitt got banged up. He's the all-time leading rusher, but there were times that he was banged up.
There were weeks he didn't practice. So, John, there's one thing I wanted to mention too. I don't think the screen game has been as effective this year, and I think Nick Sirianni tries to make it work. It just whatever combination, whether it's blocking or Jalen Hurts thrown or whatever. Do you think someone like Kenny Gainwell could kind of revive that going forward?
Well, I think, the screen game is sort of an extension of, the passing game in general. And when you struggle to pass the football down the field, it's a little bit more difficult to get that space. I mean, you saw week one with the wide receiver screens, the bubble screens, the slip screens, when nobody knew what was coming. It worked great. And then when they figured out, all right, this is how they're going to go at us, it didn't work so great. I do think Kenny Gainwell could be a great screen player in a different offense. I do think that. So I do think he has the skill set to do it. I just don't think they're running. If you're thinking about the old Andy Reid offense, that was a great screen team. They're not running that type of offense, so it's more difficult to get people to bite on that kind of stuff.
Thank you, John. You made me laugh because I remember Andy Reid, who used to say, well, screenplays are really runs, because people would second guess Andy Reid because he threw the ball too much. So he had to somehow justify it and go, well, a screen is a run. Why don't you count that as a run? No, it's a pass, and it's a pass for the Eagles. And yes, now the coach is going to say, oh, it's a pass, because people are going to say he runs the ball too much. So screen games could be interpreted any way you want them to. Not screen game. Did the Eagles miss out on an opportunity in camp? And, oh, by the way, Jonathan Gannon, I heard you asked Jonathan a question yesterday. I thought he was good. He did a good job of explaining a bunch of things, except he used as an excuse that we didn't really have training camp, the off-season workouts, and all our players missed out on that. And that's one of the shortcomings we had. The guys that, McPherson he was talking about, didn't have the camp. Well, nobody did. Everybody in the NFL didn't have it. So you're just in the same boat with everybody else. Don't use that as an excuse. Did they miss out on an opportunity to make Kenneth Gainwell a slot receiver? Because it looks like they could use one right about now, and people still love his talent. Throwing him in there at this point is just not fair to the young man. Did the Eagles miss the boat by not working on that back in the summer days when you were down there at the NovaCare complex?
No, I kind of jokingly threw that out there the other day. First of all, number one, they split him out a lot. So it's not like he doesn't play outside. They knew he had that kind of skill set. But as far as a full-time slot receiver, no, he's a good running back. So they're not going to move him from running back. He's like most rookies. He needs some seasoning. He makes some mistakes. Obviously, kind of lost his job because of pass protection and ball security, which is not surprising with a young running back who hasn't touched it a lot. When you lose a fumble or you miss a blitz pickup and cause an interception, it happens all the time, unfortunately. And as you get more experience, you get a little bit better. The Eagles need a real slot receiver. And that's where I said, yeah, and Devontae Smith can play in the slot as well. So you can go about it a lot of different ways. In that, I talked about that veteran receiver. If you get to the offseason, it could be an outside guy. You can play Devontae more in the slot. That's the luxury of having a player like Devontae Smith who can move inside and outside. But they need a real receiver to complement him in that receiving corps as a whole. And Kenny Gainwell's ultimately going to be, Austin Eckler type player. That's what they think. And that's where he should be. But in the guts of the season, you say to yourself, last week is when I brought up the example because they didn't dress him. And, okay, the other three running backs deserve to be dressed. Miles is the best running back. Jordan Howard deserved his playing time. Boston Scott deserved his playing time. So I get it from that standpoint. But then you have such ineffectiveness at the wide receiver slot. So why not dress them and just split them outside for a particular game just to try to get through it? But I don't think that's viable long term.
John, there's about 5 or 6 teams competing for the final 2 wildcard spots in the NFC. Obviously, right now it's Minnesota and New Orleans. The Eagles beat New Orleans. They beat Carolina. Atlanta somehow is still in it, but that's just the way the NFL is this year. Who are the Eagles' 2 biggest threats to taking that wildcard spot right now?
Well, I think one, San Francisco hosts Minnesota. I think that's one. Whoever wins that game is probably going to make the playoffs, I would think. And I think the 49ers will probably win that game. Although, you talk about the NFC West as a whole, and then they got to play the Rams, they got to play the Cardinals, and maybe they get beat up from that standpoint. But I do think one of those 2 teams is going to be probably the most difficult, and maybe the loser is the second most difficult, to be honest. It looks like New Orleans is going to be without Kamara again and Armstead and Ramczyk, so they're leaking oil. Washington concerns me a little bit, and I don't even know why. I can't verbalize it, probably because I don't like anybody else. And I say, well, that team could jump up and bite you. And Taylor Heineke can play well, at least at times. Probably the consistency is not there. But overall, I mean, I'm not to this point yet, but I'm getting to the point where I'm turning the Eagles could make the playoffs and the Eagles should make the playoffs because of the schedule. And it starts with the Giants and Jets, and obviously back-to-back weeks, and then you get the Giants again after the bye. You got to get 3 wins there, period. Yeah. You got to get 3 wins. And if they get those 3 wins, I think they're in good shape.
3 very winnable games and 3 games in which I think they're going to be favored. I think they're going to be favored in all 3. They're already favored against the Giants, 3.5. They'll be favored against the Jets. And then when they come home, after they beat the Giants this week, they'll surely be favored against the Giants again. All right, Johnny Mac, I need one prediction for you before we let you go. We started today's show talking about the sieve that is the New York Giant line and how it's making everyone pay a price around it, starting with Jason Garrett, Saquon Barkley. Can you really evaluate the Giant quarterback behind that offensive line? The answer is yes, he can't play. Haven't changed my opinion on that. Who on the Eagles is going to be able to take advantage of this? They've got 18 sacks for the year, 1 game, 5 against the Lions. So you look at the rest, that's 13 sacks in 10 games. That's not a whole hell of a lot, John. Somebody could do some eating this weekend. Who's going to be the Eagle defensive lineman that gets to chow down because the Giants' offensive line stinks?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to get a ton of pressures, and you know me, they don't have a lot.
I didn't ask you about pressures. We know you love pressures. Yeah. Sacks pay the rent.
Well, they don't.
Tell me who's going to get the sacks.
I go all the way, and here's the thing: I go all the way back to. And by the way, there's Aaron Rodgers, real quick, is on Pat McAfee's show every week. Everybody probably realizes that because of the vaccine stuff a couple of weeks ago. But he was talking. There's a clip out there. People should search it out. They should look for it. There's a clip about him talking about Harrison Smith in Minnesota because he just played him last week. And it really gives you an in-depth look of what Jonathan Gannon is trying to accomplish on the Eagles defense, trying to evolve it into. So that's why I encourage everybody to seek it out and show, because Aaron Rodgers, obviously one of the smartest quarterbacks to ever play the game. And he explains why that Zimmer defense is so difficult. And that's what Jonathan Gannon is trying to do. So that's why I'm bringing this up. You go all the way back to Mike Zimmer in Cincinnati. His pass rush was always about discipline, always about keeping your lanes, always about keeping the quarterback contained, not about sacks. That's what they're trying to do. And I see Jody rolling his eyes. You can roll your eyes, but I'm telling you the truth.
John, when was the Viking defense ever a top 5 defense? Aaron Rodgers can say nice things about him all he wants. What has Zimmer's defense ever gotten the Minnesota Vikings?
5 years in a row, they were a top 5 defense. 5 years consecutively. Now, they've fallen off over the past 2 years because of injuries and losing guys in free agency. They had a run, ask Jeff, they had a run where they were number 1 or number 2 or number 3, I think it was for 4 years in a row. That is, and if you talk to people around this league, I say it all the time, when they talk about the defense of football, Zimmer's one of the first or second or third names they bring up. There's a couple other guys. Vic Fangio, I think, is better, for instance. And we just saw Vic a couple weeks ago. And, if you don't have the talent, you still can't have success. But when you have the talent and you have the scheme, and I only bring it up because that's what Gannon is trying to accomplish. Now, you might not like it. You might not agree with it. You might roll your eyes, but I'm trying to say that's what he's preaching. He's preaching discipline on the pass rush. That's why you see the pressures, but you don't necessarily see the sacks. And it happened way back to those Cincinnati defenses, who, by the way, Jody, were also top 5. Look it up. The guy has had more top 5 defenses than anybody else in this league. That's what he's trying to accomplish.
Here's one for you, John. So I'm not a hot take guy, as you know, but I said this for years. If Kirk Cousins was with the Vikings when they had those top 5 defenses, we'd be looking at Kirk Cousins a whole lot differently than we do now.
Yeah, and by the way, offensive line as well. They can't fix their offensive line. They've been trying for half a decade. It's actually
amazing. Kirk Cousins has 21 touchdowns and 2 interceptions this year. It really is.
They have a really, really bad offensive line, and they've had a really bad offensive line for about 5-6 years. They're another one of those teams that can't fix the offensive line, and that's why I say Jeff Stoutland, if the Eagles make the playoffs, the MVP of the Philadelphia Eagles is not a player, it's Jeff Stoutland.
Yeah, on that we certainly can agree. J-Mac, hope COVID testing goes well for you, buddy. We'll see you back here on Friday.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good Thanksgiving, John.
John McMullen, usual co-host, doing the guest thing today. He's got COVID testing. So we got Jeff Kerr in his place. We appreciate you tuning in here on Birds 365 on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. Oh, by the way, we still got an hour and change to play today. And then we got a special Thanksgiving show coming up here. Football-centric. Barrett Brooks, Derek Gunn, Rob Ellis are going to be on hour and a half down the road from now with a Thanksgiving Eagles football special 1-hour show here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel, which you want to be tuned for. While you're at it, we appreciate you streaming in with us. Like us here on Birds 365.